They warned him nothing good ever sells for $1 out in Dry Creek. But Wyatt Ellison, a widowed cowboy chasing silence, took the deal anyway. What he found wasn't just a dusty porch and broken fence. It was a young woman standing in his kitchen, like she'd never left. That afternoon, with the sun sitting hard and mean above the scrubland, Elias Mercer rode up to Dry Willow Ranch, 100 acres of promise and memory for the price of a single, lonely dollar. Folks in Mesa Hollow whispered about land like that. Most called it cursed, some called it abandoned, but Eli only saw a chance, maybe his last, to carve out something that belonged to him, fair and square. The air shimmered with heat and old hope. Beyond the splintered fence line, cattle ghosts haunted the grass, bones half sunk where no one bothered to collect them. The main gate swung with every gust, hinges screaming against the world. Eli dismounted, boots sinking into powdery dust. His palm lingered on the weathered post, tracing bullet scars older than himself. A faded sign swung from a single wire. Dry Willow, the W hanging upside down like a half-remembered prayer. He pushed through the broken gate and crossed the yard, every step stirring memories he hadn't made yet. The main house stood stubborn against the years, boards gray as old men's hair, front door drooping on rusted hinges. Eli set his satchel down and tried the knob, but the door shuddered and stuck, protesting with the defiant whine of a thing too long left alone. He found a bent nail driven right through the jamb, maybe to keep out trouble, or maybe just to remind the wind who was boss. Inside, shadows pooled like water, the smell of dry rot and fireplace ash pressed close. Light knifed in through battered curtains, illuminating a river of footprints leading across the warped floorboards, small, quick prints, lighter than any boot he'd ever worn. His fingers tightened on the strap of his bag. Silas Crowley, that slick-talking agent down at the land office, had sworn, "You'll have it all to yourself, Eli. Nobody's lived there in years. Ranch is yours, free and clear." The old coyote even clapped him on the back, smile slick as fresh oil. But the truth didn't feel so empty, not with dust unsettled and the faintest whisper of movement drifting down from the second floor. Somewhere above, a board creaked, soft, careful, as if someone was testing their luck against the silence. Eli held still, heart thudding like hooves on hardpan. He scanned the room. Ash in the fireplace, cold old rocking chair, angled toward the window, a child's marble forgotten in the corner. Not empty, not abandoned. Watched. A quick checkout back found the well's pump frozen with age. Eli squatted, pried at the pump lever. The leather cup inside had rotted to lace. No water today, not till he fixed her up proper. He wiped sweat from his brow, letting the silence settle, thinking about all those evenings hammering spikes for the railroad, how men always talked about wanting peace and never about what it truly cost. He was a man who had made a habit out of solitude. No family waiting, no kin to write, just a dream scraped together penny by penny, a ranch to call his own, ground to bury regrets in. But as he stood in that breathless hush, dust motes swirling gold in the sun, he realized the thing that had drawn him here wasn't just a stretch of land or a house with good bones. It was the hope of starting again, clean and honest, on ground no one could take. He took a slow breath, boots creaking. From upstairs came another sound, a gentle, deliberate step, too light for a thief, too brave for a stray animal. Eli's hand hovered at his belt, but he didn't draw. "Anyone up there?" he called, voice steady, heavy with the patience of a man who'd seen too many standoffs end badly. Silence, then another creak, softer, closer to surrender than fear. That was when Eli Mercer understood. $1 might buy a man 1,000 burdens, but some debts come with a heartbeat all their own. The late sun burned low through the window glass, turning the dust in the air to flecks of gold. Eli Mercer kept his boots planted in the middle of the parlor, every sense sharpened by the hush that lingered up those stairs. He'd been in plenty of strange places, but never one that felt so haunted, not by ghosts, but by waiting. From above, the footsteps grew slower, more certain, no rush, no panic. Then she appeared, stepping into the wedge of fading light at the top landing. She couldn't have been more than 24, hair dark and loose, skin sun-browned like the land itself. Her dress, faded blue with a rip at the hem, hung on her slender frame as if it, too, remembered better days. She didn't scream, didn't run, just watched him with a gaze both tired and stubborn, the way a mule watches a stranger enter its corral. Eli, used to the spit and bluster of men, found her silence heavy. For a moment, neither spoke. The only sound, the wind testing the window pane. Finally, her voice found him, steady, no tremble, edged with something he couldn't name. "You must be the new owner. I'm Mara Larkins. I've been keeping this place together." Eli's hand slipped off the satchel. He weighed his words like river stones. "Didn't figure there'd be anyone here." Crowley swore blind this place was empty. He tried to read her face, looking for lies, but found only a sort of gentle wariness, something that belonged more to drought than to rain. Mara moved down the staircase, each step slow and measured, like she was making peace with every board. She paused at the window, pulled the tattered curtain aside, and let in the sweep of prairie, rolling grass pale as an old man's memory, sky stretched endless, the kind of space that could swallow a person's voice. "I've lived here 3 years," she said, eyes on the far edge of land. "This house saved me when nowhere else would. I patched the roof, cleaned the well, fixed fences when I could. I guess you could say we've been looking after each other." The words made Eli's chest ache in a way he wasn't ready for. He thought of his own mother, hands rough from mending things long past saving, and for a moment Mara's calm felt like kin. He tried to hide his surprise, but she seemed to see right through it. "I just bought this place for $1, he said finally, voice rough. "Supposed to be a clean slate, didn't expect—" He trailed off, eyes flicking to the floor, where the last of the sun painted shadows, long and thin. Mara let the curtain fall. "Silas Crowley doesn't know everything about Dry Willow. There's things here go deeper than paper or price." Eli let the words hang in the air. He glanced around, fireplace cold, rocking chair still, the pump outside waiting for his hand. He realized then that being alone wasn't always a gift. It was sometimes a wound that didn't bleed. He looked at her, really looked, and saw a quiet resolve, the kind that grows out of hardship instead of hope. "You planning to stay?" he asked. She met his gaze, a faint, defiant smile tugging at her lips. "It ain't about planning. This house, this land, it's all I got, for better or worse." Outside, a coyote's howl split the dusk, long and lonely. Eli felt the sound settle in his bones. In that moment, under the endless western sky, he understood. What he'd bought for $1 was worth far more than land. He'd bought into another soul's fight for belonging. Night deepened over Dry Willow Ranch, the last light flickering out behind a ragged horizon. In the kitchen, Eli struck a match and lit the stub of a lantern, filling the room with an amber glow. Shadows curled along the cracked walls. He sat at the table, Mara across from him, both silent at first, listening to the old house breathe, timbers creaking, a night wind sighing along the eaves. Eli studied Mara in the lantern's hush. He'd seen folks beaten down before, but there was something else in her, a steel beneath the hurt. She picked at a loose thread on her sleeve, eyes far away. Eli cleared his throat, rough as gravel. "I never meant to intrude," he said, "but if I paid for this place—" He let the thought hang, feeling foolish for caring so much about a deed when the world could turn on a bullet or a lie. Mara looked up. her gaze tired but unwavering. You didn't intrude, you just didn't know the truth. She leaned back, letting the light hit her face, shadowing the sharp lines worry had carved there. See, this ranch, it's more than fence and wood. There's a vein of gold up at Coyote Ridge. My daddy, Thomas Larkins, spent 10 years mapping every line and seam in those hills, said it was the last good thing in him. Eli listened as Mara's voice dropped, turning brittle. One night, the Barlow twins sent men to the claim. There was a cave-in. Folks called it an accident, but I know better. Daddy died down there, and 2 days later the Barlows showed up with fancy papers, forged clean as a whistle, claiming he owed them everything. She clenched her fist. They took our home, our land, every damn thing but my breath. He felt the weight of her anger, the old American kind, quiet, stubborn, carved out of loss. So you stayed? He asked. Mara nodded, a hard line set in her jaw. I found the original deed. Daddy hid it, wrapped up with his survey maps, showing just where the gold runs deepest. I keep it close. The Barlows, they know I've got it. That's why Silas Crowley never pressed you for more than $1. To them, this ranch is just bait, and I'm the rabbit they mean to flush out. Eli let the truth settle. He pictured the Barlows, slick suits, hands stained with someone else's labor. He pictured Mara, tough and lean, holding her father's claim against a world gone crooked. You think they'll come for you? He asked, voice low. They already have, more than once. Mara looked toward the hearth. I learned to listen for boots in the night, fixed every fence, patched every shingle. But the thing that keeps me breathing is knowing what Daddy hid under this floor. She pointed to a loose board by the fireplace, worn soft by years of foot traffic. Don't step too heavy there. Eli grunted. He remembered Crowley's smile at the land office, the way he'd brushed away Eli's questions about previous owners. It all made sense now, the $1 price, the way folks in Mesa Hollow glanced away when he spoke of Dry Willow. He stood, crossed to the pump outside, and worked the handle. The lever groaned, water sputtering then surging forth, a clear stream at last, shimmering in the lantern's spill. Mara came to the door, arms folded against the chill. Together they watched as water pooled in Eli's calloused palm. He drank deep, felt the grit and life of the land fill his chest. You fix the pump? Mara asked, half a smile on her lips. He nodded, wiping his mouth. Ain't nothing in this world that can't be mended if you're stubborn enough. Inside, the fire crackled. The house felt less empty, more like something claimed, not just by deed or blood, but by the sheer act of two souls refusing to yield. And in that fragile quiet, Eli knew the silent law of old houses. Keep its secrets, mend its bones, and it just might shelter you when the storm comes. Sleep that night came uneasy, torn by the wild yip of coyotes and the restless shifting of the wind. By dawn, Eli Mercer was already awake, boots on the cold floorboards, the sour taste of suspicion stuck in his mouth. Over black coffee, Mara told him she needed to check the fence line, and he watched her go, a silhouette against a world still smudged with night. Eli saddled his gelding and rode into Mesa Hollow. The little town looked the same as it did yesterday, but now every knot in the boardwalk and every muttered greeting felt like it held some piece of a puzzle he hadn't seen before. The land office squatted near the feed store, its sign faded, but its authority sharp as ever. Inside, Silas Crowley was already busy, hunched over a stack of papers, pen scratching like a beetle on the desk. Crowley was thin as a whip, eyes shifty, hair slicked back with too much pomade. He looked up, face splitting into a practiced grin. "Mornin', Eli. Settling in out there, are ya?" Eli nodded slow, watching Crowley's hands. "Place is bigger than I expected," he drawled. "Mighty quiet. Just the wind and the boards talking to each other." He paused, searching Crowley's face for a crack. "You said it was empty, Silas, but it ain't." Crowley shrugged, all innocent bluff. "Far as I knew, nobody claimed that patch for years. Maybe a drifter or two wandered through, but I reckon the dust out there's got a mind of its own. You sign the papers, Eli, stamp and all, legit as church on Sunday." Eli's eyes narrowed. He remembered the seal Crowley had pressed onto the deed. Red wax, the county mark, neat as you please. Too easy, he thought now. Land don't change hands for $1 unless someone wants rid of it fast. Or someone's got a secret worth burying. He pressed on. "A widow over at the livery said you've been busy moving land cheap lately. She seemed to think you had your own reasons." Crowley's grin faded. "But some folks never could mind their business," he said, voice tightening. "But if you're here to buy trouble, Eli, you'll find there's more than enough to go round in Mesa County." Just then, the door swung open, and in walked Alma Kettering, the livery widow herself. She was tall and straight, with a steely gray bun and a look that could slice through barbed wire. "Silas," she said, eyeing him coolly, "heard you sold Dry Willow again. Funny how that patch never stays in the same hands for long." Crowley flushed, shuffling papers. "That land's cursed is all, always was." Alma snorted. "Cursed with men who think a red seal means they own what don't belong to 'em." She turned to Eli. "Be careful out there. Some critters don't just howl at the moon. They wait for you to drop your guard." Outside, Eli caught sight of Ben Yazzie, the Navajo blacksmith, walking slow beside the general store. Ben tipped his hat, then crouched down by the dust, running fingers over the prints. "3 horses been by your ranch, Eli. Shod different, but all heavy in the step, ain't drifters. Somebody's been scoping your line." Eli felt a shiver work through him. Even here in the safety of the town, the web was tightening. Down by the telegraph office, the wire rattled and buzzed. Huck Doyle, the telegraph man, tapping out a message as the day's heat rolled in. Eli didn't catch the words, but he saw the way Huck glanced out the window, nerves twitchy, as if he was waiting for trouble or signaling its arrival. Riding back out of town, the land felt changed, shadows stretching longer, every hill watching. Eli realized that whatever deal he'd struck with Crowley, it wasn't a bargain, it was bait, and something big was circling for the catch. That night the wind howled harder, and Eli found himself checking the locks and making a mental note of where Mara kept the rifle. For the first time, Dry Willow felt less like a second chance, and more like a trap set by men who wrote the law in ink and broke it in blood. Afternoon in the high country always brought a restless wind, one that scraped through the sage and sent dust devils whirling down every empty stretch of road. Eli Mercer spent the morning fixing a sagging fence post out near the western paddock, but his mind kept straying to the words traded in Mesa Hollow and to the way Mara watched the horizon, half expecting it to bite back. He didn't have to wait long. It was Ben Yazzie, riding in slow with his hat pulled low, who broke the uneasy silence. "Saw 3 men at the old creek crossing," Ben said. "Didn't act like drovers or ranch hands. Rode quiet, circled once, then vanished into the brush. Watch yourself, Eli." By mid-afternoon, a powdery haze marked the far end of the long dust trail. 3 riders silhouetted by the sun, their movements precise and patient, like wolves scenting blood. Eli's hand went instinctively to the rifle behind the door, but he didn't move. He stood on the porch, shoulders squared, watching as the men drew near. The lead rider was Vern Kincaid, tall and raw-boned, with a grin that cut as sharp as barbed wire. Flanking him were Rook Jensen, hawk-eyed, silent, with a rifle cradled casual across his lap, and Pike Dalton, younger but mean-looking, fiddling nervously with his reins. Together they fanned out in a slow, deliberate semicircle, blocking every easy route off the property. Kincaid tipped his hat. "Afternoon," he called, his voice slick with false cheer. "We're just out for a friendly chat. Place like this, quiet, peaceful. Be a shame if anything upset the balance." Eli didn't return the smile. He kept his feet planted square on the porch boards, dust swirling at his boots. "That's so. Well, you found it peaceful, 'cause I aim to keep it that way." Kincaid leaned forward in the saddle, eyes never leaving Eli. "Word is, this patch of dirt changed hands lately. Some might wonder what a man like you wants with a place that's got more ghosts than cattle." Eli kept his voice low and steady. "What I do with my land's my business." Pike Dalton circled closer to the barn, cutting off the back trail. Rook shifted in his saddle, the sunlight glinting off the steel of his rifle. Kincaid's gaze flicked toward the house, lingering on the windows where Mara's face might have been, watching. "Fact is, some friends of ours got an interest in this property," Kincaid went on, "and in the folks what might be hiding out here." His grin widened. "Wouldn't be neighborly to turn a blind eye, would it?" Eli's jaw tightened. He thought of Mara, of the hidden deeds beneath the hearth, of Crowley's slippery handshake at the land office. He saw now how it all fit, a trap set by men who wrote their own rules. He glanced at the yard, at the way the three men's horses blocked every escape. His mind ticked through his options. None good, none safe. But one thing he knew, a man's worth in this country wasn't measured by what he owned, but by what he was willing to stand up for. Kincaid let silence fall, just long enough for the air to thicken with threat. "So what do you say, Mercer? Care to let us have a look around? We promise not to break anything that matters, unless it matters to you." Eli shook his head slow. "This is private property. You want to cross that line, you best be ready to finish what you start." For a moment, nobody moved. Then Rook's horse snorted, and Kincaid's hand dropped casually to the pocket watch at his belt, flicking it open as if measuring out the last grains of someone else's luck. A breeze rattled the barn door, and dust curled along the porch steps. In that stillness, Eli Mercer felt the weight of the land and of every choice that had brought him here. For better or worse, he was no longer alone, and Dry Willow was no longer just a place to hide from the world. It was a place a man might have to fight to keep. The air between the house and the riders felt stretched thin as an old fiddle string, every second taut and trembling. Eli Mercer stood his ground on the porch, feeling the sun baking down on his neck and the pulse of something dangerous gathering like a storm. Vern Kincaid slipped from his saddle, boots hitting the dust with a thud. He carried himself with the lazy confidence of a man who'd seen his share of men flinch. "Don't mean to trouble you, Mercer," Kincaid said, swinging his pocket watch by its chain. "But it's come to our attention there's a certain young woman, Miss Mara Larkins, been hiding out here. The Barlow boys are mighty anxious to have a word with her." He let the watch click shut, the sound sharp in the hush. "I figure you won't mind if we take a look inside." Eli let his gaze rest on each of them, Kincaid's sly smile, Rook's cold eyes, Pike's nervous hands. "This is my place," Eli replied, voice flat as sun-baked clay. "You got a warrant, you show it. Otherwise, you're just men with guns looking to stir up trouble." Pike Dalton nudged his horse closer to the barn, blocking the path to the livery. Rook Jensen moved to the side, his rifle never straying far from Eli's midsection. The three of them had closed in tight, fencing Eli to the porch like a steer in a pen. Kincaid's smile faded, replaced by something meaner. "You got a lot of nerve, friend, protecting folks who don't belong, who bring nothing but grief to honest land." He spat into the dirt, eyes never leaving Eli. "I'd hate for anyone to get the wrong idea about who you're siding with." Eli's hand hovered near his belt, not quite touching the grip of his old Colt, but the message was clear. "Ain't about sides, it's about the law." Behind him, the screen door creaked. Mara stepped onto the porch, shoulders squared, chin set like she'd come to terms with whatever would happen next. Her eyes never left Kincaid. "You're wasting your time," she said quietly. "I won't let you drag anyone else into this." Kincaid's gaze sharpened. "Now that's mighty noble, Miss Larkins, but you know as well as I do the Barlow twins won't quit till they get what they came for. Why not save us all some trouble?" Mara swallowed, then turned to Eli. "Let them search," she whispered, but he caught the flicker of desperation beneath her calm. "This ain't worth dying over." Eli shook his head. "Don't reckon I'm the one choosing, Mara." His voice dropped to a growl. "Law or no law, a man don't turn over a guest to wolves." Rook Jensen finally spoke, voice as flat as the plains. "Why make this harder than it needs to be, Mercer? You're protecting a thief. Barlow boys have every right." Eli's lips tightened. "Lot of things pass for right in these parts. Doesn't make 'em so." The pocket watch swung in Kincaid's fist, the metal glinting with every tick. "Clock's running, friend. Last chance for you to act smart." At that, Pike swung down from his horse, circling toward the porch steps. But the old door rusted and hung crooked by that bent nail stuck tight, delaying Pike's approach by precious seconds, just as Eli had hoped. Mara stepped forward, blocking Pike's way. "Let me go, Eli. They won't stop until they have what they want. No need for you to get caught in my mess." Eli met her eyes, saw the fear and the resolve knotted together. "Sometimes," he said, "you find out who you are by what you won't give up. This house, this ground, and anyone under its roof, they're under my care now." A hush settled. Even the cicadas seemed to go quiet. Kincaid's eyes narrowed and Rook's rifle edged higher. For a breathless moment, everything hung on the razor's edge. Law bent and nearly broken, 3 guns against 1, and a woman with nothing left but her own word. In the tension of that porch trial, as sun and silence pressed close, it became clear. In the wild country west of Mesa Hollow, justice was measured not by the badges men wore, but by the choices they made when the chips were down. With dusk falling, the pressure on the porch swelled like a storm just out of sight. Eli stood his ground, but he could feel the danger tightening, a coil, a countdown, just waiting for a wrong move. The silence was broken only by the soft, hollow clatter of Kincaid's pocket watch and the nervous pawing of Pike's horse out by the livery gate. Inside, Mara moved quietly, eyes sharp as flint. She slipped from the porch and into the parlor, footsteps soft as a whisper. Eli caught the movement from the corner of his eye and did his best to keep Kincaid and the others occupied. Rook called out, "She ain't got nowhere to run, Mercer. We'll take this place apart, board by board, if we have to." But Mara had learned every quirk of Dry Willow Ranch in 3 long, lonesome years. She crouched by the fireplace, heart hammering against her ribs. Fingers trembling just a little, she pressed on the loose board, third from the left, worn smooth by time and secrets. With a gentle pry, it gave way, revealing a shallow pocket lined with old cloth. She reached in and pulled out a battered leather pouch and a roll of yellowing survey maps. The lantern glow flickered over the spidery handwriting, her father's mark, sure and true, veins and fault lines marked in blue ink, every shaft and tunnel mapped with a miner's precision. Here was the truth the Barlow twins had tried to bury with her daddy, the gold that could buy a man's freedom or dig his grave. Back on the porch, Eli kept Kincaid talking, the way a man might keep a coyote busy at the fence. "All this for one woman and a plot of land no one wanted till yesterday," he said, voice hard as a fence post. "Makes a man wonder what you're really after." Kincaid's grin faltered. "Business, Mercer, just business." Mara tucked the papers close and returned to the hall, her breath shallow but steady. She caught Eli's eye through the dusty window pane, a look that said, "I have it. Now what?" Eli's relief was a stone sinking in a well. He stepped off the porch, drawing Kincaid's attention away from the house. "Ain't nobody but us and the setting sun, boys. If you got something to say, spit it out." Rook shifted in his saddle, Pike circled tighter, but Eli, drawing slow, careful breath, kept himself between the threat and the door. "Ain't your business what I've got in my house, or who's taking shelter there?" Inside, Mara unrolled the map, running her thumb along the dark blue lines her father had once traced. She felt the weight of years, the memory of his voice explaining each ridge and shaft. She remembered the day he handed her the rolled parchment, whispering, "Someday you'll have to choose who to trust." With the papers in hand, she steeled herself. The evidence that could topple the Barlow Empire was in her grasp, but it was also a target painted on her back. The sun dipped lower, painting the prairie gold. Mara hid the deed and maps under her apron, stepped out onto the porch, and stood beside Eli, shoulders squared, eyes fierce. "I won't run," she said quietly. Eli gave the faintest nod. In the hardening light, side by side, they looked like two souls ready to hold their ground against the whole of Sun Mesa County. In the hush that followed, even Kincaid seemed to feel the change. A fight for gold and land had turned into something more, something written in blood, loss, and the stubborn hope that justice once found might actually stick. It was the kind of evening that made a man believe the world might never change. Crickets humming, shadows growing long over the baked ground. But out on Dry Willow's trail, the rhythm of hoofbeats shattered that illusion. A string of riders pushed hard from the eastern flats, dust curling behind them like a signal fire. Eli and Mara stood rigid on the porch. Mara's hand drifted to the fold of her apron, where the deed and maps pressed close to her skin. Eli watched the new arrivals with a practiced eye, counting the glint of sunlight on gunmetal and the shape of authority in their line. At their head rode Sheriff Amos Tully, tall in the saddle, hair graying at the temples, his badge flashing silver every time the sun caught it. 4 deputies fanned out behind him, boots scuffing the earth, faces set and wary. They came to a halt just shy of the house, the scent of sweat and horse mixing with the evening wind. Tully's voice carried measured and calm. "Evenin', Mercer. Got some business in these parts, hearing about trouble brewing at Dry Willow." His gaze swept across Kincaid, Rook, and Pike, taking in the standoff with a veteran's indifference to threat. Vern Kincaid straightened up, hand never straying far from his holster. "Sheriff Tully, didn't expect you out this way." Tully smiled thinly. "Man never expects trouble till it's sitting on his porch." He tipped his head toward Eli and Mara. "Folks here under your protection, Mercer?" Eli nodded. "Just trying to keep things peaceful, Sheriff. Seems some men have other plans." The 2 semicircles, one of the law, one of hired guns, measured each other across the dusty yard, tension wound tight as barbed wire. Rook's eyes flicked from the sheriff's badge to the rifle at his side. Pike shifted in the saddle, jaw clenched white. "Let's not make a mess," Tully said, voice soft but iron underneath. "You boys want to talk, that's fine, but if anyone draws iron on my ground, we'll settle it quick. We're—" Kincaid grinned, but there was a crack in his bravado. "Just collecting what's owed, Sheriff. Miss Larkins here has property don't belong to her." Mara, chin high, replied steady. "What's mine was stolen by men who call themselves rightful owners. I aim to see justice done." The sheriff's eyes lingered on her, then flicked back to Kincaid. "Funny how justice always seems to favor the man holding the gun or the deed, but the law's still got a say out here." Pike Dalton shifted again, hand trembling as he toyed with his reins. Sheriff Tully noticed, gave the young man a hard look, then turned to Eli. "I suggest everyone keep calm. Long night ahead if we start trading bullets." Eli nodded, watching every movement, muscles coiled. He saw Kincaid's watch come out, fingers snapping it open, checking the time as if daring fate to strike. For a long, breathless moment, nothing happened. Two forces, the old law of survival and the new law of the badge, stared each other down, both unwilling to blink first. The dust, the badge, the blood memory of the land, all waiting for the first mistake. As the sky deepened toward night, the only thing shining brighter than Sheriff Tully's badge was the resolve burning in the eyes of the two souls on the Dry Willow porch. The world seemed to hold its breath as dusk pressed in on Dry Willow Ranch. Riders and lawmen watched each other through the haze of old grudges and gun smoke memories, waiting for the thread to snap. Sheriff Amos Tully swung down from his horse, his boots settling in the dust with the kind of certainty a man earns only after years on the side of the law. He strode toward the porch, hand resting easy on his sidearm, his eyes sweeping over Eli, Mara, and then Kincaid's crew. "Vern Kincaid," he called, voice low but sharp. "By order of Sun Mesa County, you and your men are wanted for questioning in connection with murder, robbery, and conspiracy to defraud the estate of Thomas Larkins." The words landed like hammer blows. Pike Dalton stiffened, eyes wide. Rook Jensen shifted in the saddle, fingers tightening on his rifle. Even Kincaid's face flickered, the first hint of real fear crackling through his bravado. "Old Zeb Pike," Tully continued, "has sworn out a statement. Said he saw you and those Barlow boys tampering with the supports in Larkin's mine. Saw you ride out before the collapse." A gasp broke from Mara, her hand flying to her mouth. For years, she'd clung to the belief that her father's death wasn't just bad luck, but she'd never had proof. Never a witness brave or foolish enough to stand against the Barlows. Kincaid spat into the dirt, but his eyes darted, searching for escape. "That old drunk'll say anything for a bottle. You hang a man on talk like that, Sheriff." Tully's gaze hardened. His word, plus the original deed and survey Miss Larkins has hidden, is enough to hang a pack of you. There's a warrant for your arrest, Vern, and your friends will be judged by the company they keep. Pike Dalton's horse danced sideways, the boy's nerves fraying at the edges. I didn't sign up for murder, Vern," he stammered. "You said it was just business." Kincaid shot him a look black as thunder. "Shut your mouth, Pike. Ain't no one hanging here tonight." Rook Jensen, ever silent, just watched the horizon, calculating the odds, weighing loyalty against self-preservation. Eli stepped down from the porch, placing himself between Mara and the line of guns. The evening had grown chill, but his resolve ran hot. "You heard the law. Maybe it's time to lay down your iron, boys." For a long heartbeat, nothing moved but the wind. Then Tully's voice, soft but implacable. "This is your chance, Vern. Don't make it harder than it has to be. The Barlow twins aren't here to back your play." Kincaid's fist clenched, jaw working. The shape of the night changed. Now it was a noose tightening, not just another bluff to be called. Mara, trembling but upright, locked eyes with Eli. In her gaze was gratitude and a kind of release. The truth of her father's death finally dragged into the open air. Some debts, Eli realized, could only be paid by standing up and facing the darkness. In that dusty half-light, law and vengeance waited, and every man there had to choose which road to ride down. You could feel the world hold its breath in that patch of dying sunlight. Lawmen and outlaws squared off in the yard, the hush heavy as a church on Sunday morning. Sheriff Amos Tully's badge glinted faintly, the only bright thing as the dusk pressed close. Eli Mercer stood just off the porch, boots rooted to dry ground, body blocking Mara from danger. For a heartbeat, even the wind forgot to blow. Vern Kincaid, eyes wild and hunted, stared down the barrel of fate. His pride wouldn't let him fold, not in front of men or law. He flicked a look at Rook Jensen, silent, hollow-eyed, then at Pike Dalton, still perched nervously on his horse, boyish face washed pale. Tully's hand hovered near his holster, voice low but steady. "Last chance, Vern. Lay down your gun. No need for any more blood." Kincaid's lips curled in a sneer. "Don't you preach at me, Sheriff. The Barlow twins'll buy my way out by sundown." He spat, but the sound was just a drop in a dry well. The seconds stretched, brittle as frost. Then, like a branch snapping in a gale, Kincaid shoved Eli hard aside, just enough to clear his own weapon. His hand flashed down, Colt leaping from leather, finger tight on the trigger. A single instant, so quick you'd miss it if you blinked, then the air split in two. Kincaid's gun went off, the shot wild, tearing a chunk from the porch post by Eli's knee. But Tully's deputies had lived through standoffs before. Their rifles barked fast and true, sending thunder rolling over the yard. Kincaid jerked as the first bullet slammed through his chest, the second spinning him around, his pistol tumbling into the dust. He staggered, eyes glazed in shock, and crumpled face first at the edge of the porch. Blood pooled dark around his shoulder. For a moment the only sound was Mara's sharp intake of breath, and the creak of old boards beneath Eli's boots as he staggered upright, ribs aching. Rook Jensen, who'd spent a lifetime looking for the exit, let his rifle drop and raised his empty hands, face gone gray as tombstone dust. Pike Dalton, fear beating out loyalty, kicked his horse and tore away down the trail, hooves drumming wild into the gathering night. The dust swallowed him up quick. Sheriff Tully kept his gun steady, but his voice was gentle as he scanned the porch. "Everyone all right?" Mara nodded, swallowing hard, but her eyes stayed on the body sprawled in the dirt. There was no victory in her stare, only a tired relief, and maybe a little sorrow for all the lives this ground had claimed. A deputy crouched by Kincaid's side, checked for a pulse, then shook his head. Silent verdict. Eli let out the breath he'd been holding. The standoff, the threats, the long brewing storm, all finished in the span of a few gunshots and a hard fall. Tully holstered his iron, stepping closer to Mara. "I'm sorry, miss. Sometimes the law comes slow out here. Sometimes it's ugly, but it's come all the same." Mara straightened, drawing herself up, dirt and grief streaking her cheeks. "He wasn't the worst of them," she said quietly, "but he was the one sent to finish what the Barlows started." She looked to Eli, gratitude and exhaustion mingling in her gaze. Eli put a steady hand on her shoulder, feeling the truth of things settle in his bones. There'd been a time he thought justice meant a badge and a courtroom, but standing in the fading light, blood in the dust, he knew the West wrote its verdicts in sweat and courage, not ink. As darkness seeped in around Dry Willow Ranch, you could hear the world exhale, the kind of quiet that comes when folks are still standing, battered but unbroken. The living gathered close, carrying one another's burdens, while the dead lay silent in the dust. Another chapter closed in the hard history of the land. For one more night, at least, law had the final word. The gun smoke still hung in the cool night air, slow to drift from the yard as though even the breeze was wary of crossing what had just gone down. Sheriff Tully holstered his iron, nodding to his deputies who set about checking the fallen and rounding up Rook Jensen with hands careful but firm. Pike Dalton was long gone, nothing left but the echo of his horse in the dark. Eli steadied Mara as she stepped down from the porch, each footfall heavy but sure. Her eyes swept over the scattered guns, the badge glinting in the lantern light, the silent final shape of Kincaid sprawled in the dust. The moment stretched, hearts beating a little slower as the truth of what had passed settled in on all of them. Sheriff Tully turned to Mara, voice gentle but carrying the weight of years. "Miss Larkins, it's time we got this all set down proper. Every paper, every witness, every word." He took a canvas pouch from his saddlebag. the kind lawmen use for evidence that matters more than gold. Mara nodded, her face lined with grief and resolve. From beneath her apron she produced the battered leather packet, fingers lingering on it for one last moment, a daughter's farewell to her father's hard-won proof. She handed it to Tully, who opened it under the lantern's glow, careful as a priest at the altar. Inside were the original deed and survey, hand-drawn maps, stamped signatures, assay notes in Thomas Larkins' bold scrawl. Tully studied each sheet, his brows furrowing as the story unfolded in black ink. Proof that the Barlow twins' empire was built on sand and blood. He wrapped the documents in oiled cloth, sealing them tight in his evidence bag with a thick line of red wax. Eli leaned against a porch post, body aching but spirit unbroken. "You reckon it'll be enough, Sheriff?" he asked quietly, watching Tully tuck the sealed pouch into his saddle. Tully nodded, jaw set. "It's enough to start a war in court, and more than enough to bring the right kind of eyes down on Sun Mesa. But we'll need testimony, yours, Mara's, and Zeb Pike's, if we can get him to town alive." From the shadows near the livery, Huck Doyle, the telegraph man, hurried over with a slip of paper in hand. "Message went out to the U.S. Marshal in Prescott, just like you said," he reported. "They'll be wanting copies of everything before the week's out." Eli met Mara's gaze, both of them feeling the weight of what was left to come. Dry Willow was safe for now, but the real battle would play out under the courthouse roof, not beneath the stars. For the first time, Eli understood what it meant to take a stand, not just for himself, but for something larger, the dignity of a life fought for and nearly lost. Sheriff Tully patted Mara's shoulder. "You've done your part, miss. Next week I'll ride back out and we'll get you to Sun Mesa under my protection. The Barlow twins won't like it, but law's got long arms when it wants." Rook Jensen, silent now and stripped of his bluster, was led away by two deputies. Eli watched, not with hate, but with the kind of understanding a man gets after he's seen too much death to want any more of it. Mara stepped close, voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you, Eli. I don't know if we'll ever see real justice, but tonight, it's enough to breathe easy." He gave her a slow, tired smile. Sometimes surviving is the hardest job of all. With the evidence sealed, the testimony spoken, and the yard quiet, save for the chirr of night insects, Dry Willow Ranch settled into a hard-won peace. Yet everyone there knew the story wasn't over, not with the Barlows still breathing, and the law just now catching up to the long shadow they'd cast over the land. But for one night, hope sat on the porch with them, as real as the stars over Sun Mesa. The days that followed settled over Dry Willow Ranch like dust after a stampede. Everything looked still, but nothing was truly at rest. With the law's seal on the deed and survey, and the shadow of Kincaid finally gone, the ranch breathed a little easier. But peace out here always wore borrowed boots. Sheriff Tully rode out at dawn 2 mornings after the shooting, leaving Mara and Eli with a promise. "I'll return for you both in a week's time. We'll ride into Sun Mesa together, and I'll see you safe to the courthouse doors." He tipped his hat, eyes sharp beneath his brim. "Barlow twins might have sway in back rooms, but they don't run this county, not while I've got breath." Eli watched the sheriff's dust settle on the horizon, the weight of the coming days settling on his shoulders. He fixed fences and double-checked the locks, feeling every board in the house, every nail, every shadow. At dusk, Mara would linger on the porch, eyes scanning the line of cottonwoods for movement, as if she half expected the night itself to reach for her. That third night, a storm threatened the mesa, wind battering the eaves. Just before the worst of it hit, Ben Yazzie appeared out of the darkness, quiet as a ghost. He stood in the yard, hat in hand, boots muddy from the long trail. "Tracks by your back fence," Ben said, voice low. "4 horses moving slow, careful not to leave much sign." not locals. They doubled back toward Mesa Hollow, someone scouting the place. Eli's blood ran cold. He thanked Ben, then spent the rest of the evening stringing a bell wire around the back corral, fixing the front door's rusty nail, and making sure the old pump ran quiet and clean. Every task was done with a mind for trouble, a lesson the land never let a man forget. Inside, Mara packed a small bag with her father's Bible, a few old letters, and the dress she'd worn on her last day of school. She found Eli sitting by the hearth, checking the hiding place under the floor one last time. He met her gaze, his expression worn but kind. "Soon as the sheriff's back, we'll go together," Eli said, voice steady. "We'll walk into that courthouse side by side. No one's taking what's yours without a fight." Mara managed a small smile. "I believe you. I have to." Thunder rolled far off, the air thick with the promise of rain. From the edge of the yard, a distant shape, maybe just a coyote, maybe more, watched the ranch with hungry patience. They slept light that night, the house creaking, the wind whistling through every crack. Even safe, the knowledge of what waited beyond the fences, ambush or legal ambush, kept them wary. Out here, justice always walked with danger. The trap was set, but not yet sprung. The road to Sun Mesa promised no easy ride. But Mara and Eli, battered yet unbowed, faced the dark together, knowing that in the west every piece was just the pause before another storm. Sunset at Dry Willow was a slow, gentle thing, the kind of golden hush that made a man pause and take stock of what he'd weathered. Eli Mercer stood on the porch, arms folded over the rail, feeling the ache in his shoulders and the steadiness in his heart. He watched as the last light slanted over the fields, brushing the grass with fire and copper, turning every broken fence post and new board into something almost holy. Mara was by the well, her back to him, working the hand pump with that sure, stubborn rhythm of someone who'd learned the land's secrets the hard way. Water spilled, cold and clean, into the battered tin bucket. It glimmered in the low light, and for a second, she just stood there, letting the sound wash over her, face softened by the peace she'd never thought she'd earn. The air carried the smell of cut hay, old leather, and a faint trace of wood smoke. Eli listened to the quiet, the creak of the new nails he'd hammered into the porch, the distant bawl of a stray calf, the gentle scuff of Mara's boots on sun-baked earth. All the noise of the past days, the gunfire, the threats, the hard words, had faded out with the setting sun. He left the porch and walked slow toward Mara, hat in hand, boots raising small puffs of dust in the golden hour. She turned as he neared, a tired smile on her lips. "Pump runs good," she said, pride clear in her voice. "Almost forgot what sweet water tastes like." Eli nodded, setting his hat on the well's post. "House is holding together too. Didn't know if it ever would." He glanced at the barn, where the new boards he and Mara had put up shone pale in the evening light, the rusty hinges replaced and the old, stubborn nail in the door finally pulled free. They stood side by side, looking out over the sweep of land, fields battered by years of neglect, now coming back a blade at a time. "You ever think about leaving?" Eli asked quietly, eyes still on the horizon. Mara looked thoughtful, fingers trailing along the rim of the bucket. "For a long time, all I did was plan how to run. When the nights got rough, or when I heard horses I didn't know, I'd pack a bag and sleep with my boots on. But the more I stayed, the more I realized this place was saving me right back." She turned, her eyes searching Eli's face. "You could have walked away, you know. Would have been easier. Instead, you fixed what was broke even when you had every right to call it quits." He shrugged, that quiet, stubborn humility Western men are known for. "Maybe I was tired of quitting. Maybe I just wanted to see if something could hold." The wind picked up, warm and gentle, carrying the scent of the sage and the last hint of the day's sweat. From the porch, the light from inside the house spilled yellow and soft. A sign, Eli thought, that a man could always build a little warmth against the long dark. Mara reached for his hand, her grip strong but tender. This place isn't just wood and nails, Eli. It's memory and sweat and hope. Whatever happens when we ride to Sun Mesa, I want you to know, Dry Willow's home. Not just for me, for us, if you'll have it. Eli squeezed her hand, a slow, genuine smile creasing his weathered face. Home sounds about right, and I reckon I could use a partner for the rest of the work. They stood together as the sun slipped behind the hills, darkness settling gentle as a quilt. The air hummed with crickets, and somewhere far off a coyote called, lonely but not lost. Eli looked at Mara, at the land, at the house they'd saved, and felt a healing settle in his chest, the kind only earned by those who'd stood their ground, paid their dues, and chosen hope over running. In that last light, with the fields golden and the house whole, Dry Willow was more than just a ranch. It was a promise of partnership, of peace, of another dawn worth waking for. Evening slipped gently over Dry Willow, painting the fields in shades of violet and pewter. The world felt hushed, as if the land itself was catching its breath after so many storms. Inside the house, Eli Mercer trimmed the lamp wick, turning the flame up just enough to cast a warm, steady glow across the kitchen walls. Mara stood by the window, watching the last flickers of light fade beyond the cottonwoods. The deed and survey, now sealed and safe, resting in a heavy satchel on the table. It was a quiet most folks might call empty, but to Eli and Mara it was the rarest kind of peace. Outside, the night air was alive with the chirr of crickets, and from the barn came the soft nicker of the bay mare settling in for the night. Eli set 2 mugs on the table, pouring strong coffee from the battered tin pot, his hands steady despite the weight of what tomorrow would bring. "Never thought I'd find myself sharing a table again," he said, voice soft, eyes holding hers in the golden lamplight. Mara took her seat, folding her hands around the mug, the warmth soaking into skin still rough from work. "I spent so long waiting for someone to chase me off," she admitted. "Didn't expect someone to stay and help fix what was broke. Most folks out here, when trouble comes, they ride the other way." Eli chuckled, the sound worn but real. "Guess I was just too stubborn. Or maybe I finally got tired of being my only company." A long pause settled, comfortable as an old blanket. Mara smiled, gaze drifting to the window where the first star winked over Mesa Hollow. "You reckon the Barlow twins'll stay quiet?" she asked. Eli shook his head, honest as always. "No, men like that don't quit easy, but law's on our side now and we got something they never will." He reached across the table, palm up, a simple invitation, open as the prairie sky. Mara placed her hand in his, her grip sure. "Partners?" Eli asked, voice gruff but hopeful. "Partners," Mara answered, the single word carrying the weight of all they'd survived. They sat like that, the world narrowed to 2 battered souls, and a promise stronger than any written contract. Outside, a telegraph spark flickered in the distant town, a reminder that trouble still rode the ridgelines, that justice's work was never done. But for now, Dry Willow belonged to the people willing to fight for it, to the ones who'd turned loneliness into belonging, fear into hope. Eli rose, lamp in hand. "Let's finish up inside. Tomorrow's likely to be long." Mara stood with him, her face lit by the steady flame. Together they walked through the house, checking the locks, stoking the fire, every act a quiet vow that this home would hold. Outside, the land slept, but inside, light and trust kept the dark at bay. At Dry Willow Ranch, the hardest seasons had passed, not vanished but transformed. Where there had been sorrow, there was now partnership. Where there had been silence, a gentle laughter, and where once stood only a lonely man and a hunted girl, there was now the start of something worth tending for the rest of their days. The West, for all its storms and scars, still left room for new beginnings, and tonight, under a sky heavy with stars, Eli and Mara made one of their own, with nothing more and nothing less than a handshake and a promise that would echo through every sunset yet to come. Sometimes the land gives more than it takes. A lonely rancher came for quiet, but found something louder than gold, a second chance. Out here, justice don't ride fast, but when it comes, it stays. If this story stirred something in you, a memory, a feeling, maybe just a moment of stillness, go ahead and leave us a little sign in the comments. Even just a 0 is enough to let us know you're out there, riding with us. And if these kinds of tales feel like home to you, hit that subscribe button. We've got more stories waiting by the fire. See you on the next ride.